Good afternoon. I'm John Summers, and I'm here on behalf of Mercado Libre to talk with you about the e-commerce world, in the world and in the region, and see how it can impact your businesses. So how are we? Are we changing constantly? Is this change more and more accelerated in the world of e-commerce and in the different industries? Why? Because of the impact of the application of technology. What is going on in the world of e-commerce? More and more people are trying to do business online. Last year, 1.4 billion users in the world were buying online. If we think about the number of people being influenced in the purchasing process, the figure is even higher. $2 trillion last year were transacted in the online world. Where do we see the growth? In general, it comes from the online world. In the other world, there is some growth, but where we see the highest rates of 25% is in the online world. So it's a tremendous opportunity. And the online world, in average, is a very small percentage of retail sales worldwide. There are certain categories where 40% of sales in the case of fashion in the US, part of the sales comes from the online world. But we don't need to get to the 25-30% to feel that there is a disruption in one of the categories, and the percentages are much higher. The traditional models are challenged, and there's a demand for change. So these percentages will only rise. I don't know if it's going to be 50% tomorrow. I have no idea. But I know that the curve is only moving upwards. So where does it take place? Well, in the US, in Europe, and Asia, in particular China, but Latin America is gradually generating more and more traction. There's a specific case. People talk about the China phenomenon. It's huge. Last year, over 19% of all sales in China occurred in online platforms. When I look at the Chinese case, it's interesting, in my opinion, to watch two things that do not apply to the rest of the world, but we can use them as reference. Remember that China skipped the leap forward to modern trade to supermarkets. The reality is that they never got to generate that outside the Tier 1 cities. So when the revolution of digital commerce appeared, they moved forward, and that is why the behavior in China is so different from that of the rest of the world. The second leap in China was the access to internet, which was not through broadband as in the rest of the world. They skipped that stage and moved directly to the connection through mobile devices. And these two factors allowed e-business in China to grow even more, or to penetrate a lot more than in other parts of the world. Nevertheless, we can use this as a reference. We have to look at China. When they tell me this is happening in China or that is happening in China, I'm not so sure that the examples can be replicated in the US or Europe or Latin America. They only serve for us to know what may happen in our region. What is happening in our region, despite the fact that we are a small part of the e-business, things are growing, and they are growing a lot. And the prospects for the next 10, 15 years are important. Mercado Libre has existed for the last 18 years, and we still have a long way to go. Today, in Latin America, e-business does not represent even a 3%. It's influenced by Brazil, where it is 4.5% of the retail sales online. Argentina is near 3%, and the rest of the region under 3%, where in the US that percentage is 11%, in the UK over 15%, in Korea 18%, and in China near 20%. So Latin America is growing, but we are lagging behind compared to the rest of the world. So we have a chance to grow. Studies reveal that e-business has been growing by 20% in recent years. Mercado Libre grew by 40% last year, and we are exceeding that figure now. So in many countries, we are getting to the tipping point where a percentage of the population is now doing online transactions, and they venture to do more because there is an ecosystem, because more companies offer better experiences, and as we offer better experiences, consumers will become more demanding. We will improve our services and our industry, and it will be convenient for people to buy more online. So the trend that we see in the world is irreversible in Latin America. The good point about this, the good point about being in Latin America, is that we are always 2 or 3 years behind the rest of the world, and we can see the impact of technology and in e-business in different industries. We can see how people react, how the traditional players react or not react, and what the consequences are if we follow their line. My personal opinion is that they are not reacting. So as a consequence, we see what happens in the US with many retailers going bankrupt. And we'll talk about that later on, what we can and what we cannot do. Over the last few years, I see that the growth of e-business is a consequence of the access to the internet in broadband, or because the mobile plans are cheaper in different parts of the region. We see that a percentage of the population with access to the internet is growing, and we still have very good opportunities. At the same time, we see that as these percentages grow, the users with access to internet are daring to make more purchases, there's more penetration, and then we see the percentages on the axis here on the screen. And there's more acceleration in the center. We can see the countries, the main countries in the region, but in both axes we are far from the developed markets. So we still have a long way to go before we see Latin American countries in the upper quadrant. The other factor that we see in this e-business world is that more online sales occur in marketplaces. I work in a marketplace, so that's good news. But why is this so? If we look at the world, we see 4 major players in the marketplace world. We have eBay, Amazon in the US. There are some players in Europe. In China, we have Alibaba, JD.com, and in Latin America, Mercado Libre. 2 different models. Mercado Libre, Alibaba, and eBay are different. We don't buy goods. We simply act as marketplace. We bring the parts together, provide the infrastructure. And then there are players like Amazon and JD who combine being online retailers, and they present a platform to other sellers to take advantage of. So what do they have in common, these 5 players? They have responded to the mobile challenge faster than the average company. The world is mobile. The e-commerce world is mobile. In Mercado Libre, 70% of the searches are through mobile devices, and also 50% of our sales. The numbers have grown. So people think that technology companies do not suffer disruptions, but we do. 4 years ago, Mercado Libre or these other players were online businesses, and the developers were experts in desktop developments. The marketing people were experts in using desktop platforms. But at the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, there was a change in behavior. And I think that the first reaction of Mercado Libre was to say, well, no, maybe it's a fashion. But I think it happened with the online world. Well, maybe I have to do something, but this is not going to change my business model. For the offline people moving into the online world, e-commerce companies started to change at the end of the 90s. But in the online world, transitions are much faster. Had we not reconverted in 2013, Mercado Libre would have been obsolete. So I would like to remove the myth from this idea that we are never challenged. I think that we were fast enough to move into the new world, and that is why 80% of the online sales today in the most developed countries use platforms similar to ours. But e-business or business is not the only industry that is being challenged. Think about advertising. Advertising world is moving massively to be online, which generates many, many problems. The larger groups have issues to face. Also the media trying to transform. Retailers in the offline have had to adapt themselves. And in this world, there are two players that dominate, Facebook and Google. What do they have in common? They were the ones that quickly understood that their business model was going to be challenged by the mobile world, and they also had to move faster between 2012 and 2013 to change into the new reality. So, we are in a world of constant change, accelerated change. And the good and the bad news is that there's no industry, whether it's a service, B2B products, that will not be impacted by technology in the next few years. I think this is high time for us in Latin America to take a look at what is happening in the world and understand we either change or there will be startups or new companies different from ours that will take up our businesses. Why? Because they will be more agile. They are not afraid to change because they are ready to run risks. I think this presents a great opportunity for us to bring together what happens in the online and in the offline worlds, an opportunity to integrate the physical and the digital worlds. If we stand in the shoes of consumers and we have the attitude of the consumer, we would not talk about the two worlds. For the consumer, there are not two worlds. They have a need, and they are using online means to find options. Sometimes they go to the offline world to buy, but they do this naturally. They are not aware of the difference. And every time they go from the off to the online world, they generate information. If they have a capacity to analyze information and find patterns of behavior, you as companies will be able to get more market share from that wallet of the consumer. So where to start? All of this generates fear. I'm playing in the offline world, I don't have data. What can I do? Well, if we place the consumer in the middle, we have to look at the online world. Google tells us what people look for, and that's one point of departure. And then we can start analyzing whether they show a genuine interest in something that I sell or a service I provide. We should understand how that behavior occurs and how I can play or get into that area to make my proposal interesting.
So what is the consumer looking for? Two things. Personalization, firstly, because if I put myself in his shoes, the consumer is tired of receiving the same offer that he or she is receiving. What I do in the online world is so much that I hope that on the other side there's someone who takes the trouble to understand my behavior. So I have to give priority to those who do that. And secondly, in the offline world, I still look for things that are immediate. We still have not been able to solve the wish of instant satisfaction that people have. In Mercado Libre, what am I obsessed with? Well, how to reduce the time from the moment when I push the buy button and the time when I receive the product. Those who like face-to-face contacts, well, it's because they are, in the end, human beings, and people still want a personalized experience. So I believe that there is a great opportunity to provide instant satisfaction and at the same time an excellent buyer's experience. Someone said that content is king. And in that case, mobile is the queen. 70% of all interactions nowadays, when people interact with enterprise and products, is through these devices. And it sounds very easy, but it is a great challenge. This device, from the point of view of my business, has many consequences. For example, I used to have a group of developers who were experts in developing for Uruguayan currency and also for desktops. But now the desktops are no longer used. For the users who have just met me, who are not familiarized with my brand, how do they enter? Well, through Safari and Chrome, Web Mobile, and this is one kind of experience. If afterwards I want to create loyalty, I have to develop the apps. But the Android app is one thing, and the iOS app is something else. It's different skills that the developer has to have. And my business used to be just a single platform, but now I have to think of 4 platforms, and this has a very high degree of complexity from the point of view of marketing. So those who are not thinking of their product and their service in terms of how it's going to be reflected in this device will be in a complicated situation. Some companies and some interesting cases I would like to describe now. There are companies that have probably seen things coming and now are trying to try new experiences and adapt to the new reality. No one has the formula for success, neither me or Alibaba or Amazon, but there's a lot of testing to do, and for this you have to undertake some risks. I have 8 examples. I may not be able to show them all, but different companies, some from the old world and others from the new world, that are doing interesting things for the future. Everybody says that Walmart is in a complicated situation, but I think that they are really trying to reconvert. They have customer loyalty and a strong physical presence, and I think that this is something they are trying to see how they can benefit from their physical infrastructure and at the same time solve certain things that people don't like about their stores. So this is a first way of winning the battle against Amazon for them. I have too many examples, so I'm going to skip this one. And this is an interesting case, Nike. It's not a brand that sells only clothes and sneakers. Now it's a lifetime brand, and they say, well, I'm your partner when you want to train. And they know that contact with people is still important, no matter how many technology you put in. So they try to use their stores to create events where they also create a community. The consumer still wants to have this one-to-one link with brands. And I believe that the physical world offers the immediate contact and also experiences like this one. People are not going to go to a store to buy the same thing they can buy at Mercado Libre or online in a different site. They want to receive some kind of gratification and also entertainment, and this is something that can be provided by stores. And thus, they can attract consumers, these brands, and avoid people from going to the online world. And this is a way of attracting people again, going back to the store. So this is a Nike case, and it's in an experience of virtual reality, live personalization. The users may pick the colors and create their own sneakers. And once the experience has ended, they will receive an email so that they can see the product and access Nike.com to buy them.
No sé si esto es muy escalable, si lo podés replicar en miles.
I don't know whether this is scalable or not, but the important thing is that the consumer has an excuse to go to the store, and at the same time, they are personalizing my product. And also, they create a lot of locability around the brand and noise in the digital channels. These are different ways in which traditional brands are trying to enter this digital world and use it in their favor. This Uber case is interesting once again. Uber is the company of the new economy, but they are suffering disruption themselves. It came up as an app that brought together drivers and potential passengers. But now they may be threatened by autonomous cars, so they need to start trying new things. The model for them worked well, but they can either say, well, this new world will not coming, or they can try new things, for example, the autonomous cars, and show the experience as it may come in the future. Although these are actual cases, 1 million miles have been already traveled with autonomous cars, and they know that this is what will come in the future, and they cannot wait for the future to come. Their traditional business is what is financing this kind of test. And we are not so far from this. In a few years, we will see in the US autonomous vehicles that will be much more abundant, and in Latin America, probably nothing will happen in this regard for the next 10 years. But in more developed countries, we will probably see autonomous cars in the biggest cities. And I have another case which is interesting. Volvo and the relationship with intelligent cities. I think that in our lives there will be a big change in this regard in the coming years, probably in the way in which our cities are conceived and organized. The Internet of Things will lead to new ways of interaction and also the way in which we move. And this is something that Volvo is already doing. So I believe that we are going to see more and more of these new experiments. And finally, an example related to Mercado Libre. In 2013, we felt the disruption of mobile technology, but now we are thinking of voice search, how it's going to disrupt our building. It's probably the next big change of paradigm in the online world. We will go from the mobile world, we went from the desktop to the mobile world, and in the future we will have virtual assistants that will be voice assistants, and this will disrupt our business again. The Google APIs are not ready yet in various languages, but we are already testing what we have, and we can't wait for them to be mainstreamed. We have to start trying all these and take some resources from our traditional business to test the new possibilities. So next steps, the world is changing very quickly. We can panic, we can hide our head in the ground like an ostrich, and this is not going to solve anything. Or, as many in the US have done, we can say the world is changing and we need a cultural change and start thinking about future businesses. The transition is not going to be smooth. I'd love to say it will be, but the only thing I can tell you that those who start first will be better positioned than the rest. When people ask me what's the X factor of a Mercado Libre, I don't think that we are more intelligent than the rest. We have good technology, it's true, but there is a cultural factor that is sometimes minimized. It's a company that is not feared, that does not fear taking risks. We don't stay in the status quo. There are things that we don't do well enough, but even with the things that we do well, we are constantly challenging them to see how we can improve. It's a culture in which change is the only constant thing. And it sounds fine, but it has to be done in the day-to-day activities. Any employee can come to a leader and challenge what we are doing or propose new ideas. And the leaders, we have to think of what will be the business that will win in the future. The e-commerce companies, the technology companies are suffering. It's through the same disruptions as other companies. But we try to have this culture of entrepreneurship, of not fearing risks, and also of putting the consumer as our focus. And many claim to do this, but when it affects your profits, then you're walking the talk. This is where you show that you mean business, when you make decisions that will have a financial impact on your company, things that may hurt you in the short term, but if you find the way of solving this equation from an economic point of view, then we go ahead and do it. And personal contact, this is something valid for the online and the offline world. Innovation, I showed you some things that may be very far in time, but innovation starts every day. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's taking the current processes, putting the person at the center, and making incremental improvements. I improve, I test, and I improve again. That's the kind of culture. Mobile devices, I told you about this. It's already the center of e-commerce, and this will be the trend more and more. And finally, those who are not doing e-commerce and are putting e-commerce in their daily activities have to catch up very quickly. But you're not alone. When you think of opportunities, maybe all this scares you and you don't know where to start, but think of ecosystems. E-commerce is a concept in which there are no competitors. I compete with Google and Facebook in some things, but I cooperate with them in other things. One ecosystem is that of Mercado Libre, which has millions of users and offers a lot of services. It's an ecosystem that may be useful for you, and it has many elements, but there's also an ecosystem of entrepreneurs. We have it around us. And in our case, when we opened a platform through the APIs, we saw that there was an ecosystem of entrepreneurs that are creating solutions for professionals. So we have to leverage what already exists. These entrepreneurs attract more entrepreneurs. We are working with a platform that covers the region. Here you have the developers, and they can offer you solutions for these transitions towards the digital world. So a lot of success, and don't be afraid of this transition.